This week on SUNUP.
We want to prevent those insects and the rodents and the birds from stealing our profits, and now is the time when you need to do the work to do that.
Carol Jones has storage preparation advice for the 2016 harvest, and there's an app for that.
And it includes topics on species such as pheasant, bobwhite, wild turkey, white-tailed deer, and mourning dove and waterfowl.
Oklahoma agriculture starts right now at SUNUP.
Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Oklahoma State researchers released a brand new wheat variety this week. We'll take a look at how it's different from the others a little bit later in the show. But first, we're joined by Jeff Edwards, our Extension Small Grain Specialist, to talk about the state of this year's crop. Jeff, what's your take so far? And I guess it's almost first hollow stem.
Well, the crop is in good shape right now. We are nearing first hollow stem. Anyone that's kind of on the fence about top dress applications, you know, that nitrogen should be going out there as soon as possible. And it is time to start checking for first hollow stem. We've had a fairly warm winter. We're a little bit farther along than we would normally be, and first hollow stem is going to come early this year.
And kind of your rundown on exactly how to check, because we're seeing it already, as you said.
Right, so you're going to need to check in a non-grazed area of the field. It could be outside of a hot wire, something like that. You're going to select the largest tiller on the plant, and you're going to split it open longitudinally here and look for hollow stem. And this variety right here, we're looking for about the diameter of a dime of hollow stem below the developing grain head. So this variety right now would be right at first hollow stem. Now this wheat was sown around the 1st of September, very early sown, had a lot of fertility under it. It's probably a little more advanced than a lot of wheat around the state, but still it's time to start checking because it is a really important growth stage.
What kind of questions do you get about cattle on wheat and what it does to the crop?
Well, one of the biggest misconceptions out there about first hollow stem and removing cattle from wheat pasture is the thought that as long as the cattle aren't actually clipping the heads from the wheat plant, we're okay, and that's not the case. If the wheat is large enough where the cattle are actually damaging the developing wheat heads, we're way past first hollow stem. The reason first hollow stem works is because removing cattle at that stage allows enough time for the plant to regain leaf area lost during grazing. Dylan Bucci, a graduate student of mine, did some work a few years ago that found we need about 60% ground cover to optimize yield in the system. First hollow stem allows us to get close to that.
A good indicator. Any disease concerns right now?
Well, we do have some disease concerns. There's some powdery mildew active, some leaf rust out there. We found some stripe rust in southern Oklahoma already, which is really the one that devastated our crop last year. So that's a situation we need to monitor. Some of our producers are considering what we call split fungicide applications. Really a two-pass system is the best way to describe it, where you make one fungicide application at about jointing or just after, and then another one at flag leaf. In a severe disease year, those applications can have some benefit. The key is timing. So you have to make that first application a full rate of fungicide just after jointing. So it's not going to be something you tank mix with top dress nitrogen. And by the time that application is kind of wearing off, the flag leaf is coming out, and that's when you make the second application. I generally try and go low cost in terms of fungicide on the first application, save the best product, which is generally the most expensive product, for that flag leaf application.
Of course, with any wheat crop, we're always concerned about the weather. Give us the lowdown on the freeze damage window, and then kind of where we are in terms of moisture overall.
Well, we're just entering that window for freeze injury. During the winter, we can have a lot of tissue injury and recover from it fairly well. But once the weed is jointing, the growing point's above the soil surface, that's when the injury gets real. The farther that developing weed head moves up the plant, the more risk we have in terms of injury, and the harder it is for those plants to recover. And of course, the most dangerous time for freeze injury is when the wheat is flowering. So we're entering that window. In terms of moisture, the wheat crop is sitting pretty good just in terms of moisture available to the crop. We could use a nice slow rain though to move that top dress nitrogen into the rooting profile. So that's really what we need right now, is just a nice slow gentle rain.
Okay, we'll hopefully get that soon. Jeff, thanks a lot. We'll see you again soon. And now we want to hear from our wheat geneticist Brett Carver on the new variety called Stardust.
This is a project that goes back to 2002. And during that time, when we knew white wheat had a future in Oklahoma, we were trying to combine the best sources of sprouting tolerance, pre-harvest sprouting tolerance, which is a very important trait for white wheat for it to succeed in this state. And so we had parents that were available, one of which ended up being released as a variety of it by itself, being OK Rising. It's really no different than a Bentley or a Gallagher or any one of those in terms of its agronomic capability, but the kernels are very different in their appearance. And that kernel appearance causes any whole wheat or whole grain product to be made to look different, look lighter. And that allows the miller to incorporate more bran into that product. And the more bran we can incorporate into our food products, particularly those from wheat, the better off we are from a health standpoint. We have to go where it can be marketed and marketed best, and right now that's really in the central part of the state. So we had to find something that would fit the main body of the state. And this particular line was one that actually did better in, say, north central Oklahoma. If we were in Colorado, if we were in western Kansas, you would hear a lot more about white wheat. That is where most of the white wheat is produced in the Great Plains. We can't even come close to that. We should be coming close to that. And I think eventually that influence, that breeding influence, would make its way down here. But I think we could do a little bit better job where we breed wheat for Oklahoma, best fit for Oklahoma. And that's why we have always had this tendency and this emphasis on white wheat. It just didn't result in a released variety. But now we have something, I think, that we can really claim and really suggest and endorse for Oklahoma. We have a white colored wheat that, in this particular case, Stardust, it really does produce a bright white color if it's harvested at the correct time, that is. And then when you take that kernel and you grind it, or you mill it into a whole wheat flour, that flour is much whiter, much brighter, and to me that just conjures up the image of stardust in the sky, being white and bright. But that's where the name actually came from. Seed production will be ample. Assuming everything goes okay this spring, we actually have several hundred bushels in storage in case we don't have a good crop this spring. But right now it's looking very good, and I wouldn't think there's going to be any problem acquiring seed.
Last week, Kim gave us a lot of factors that could drive the price. And are we moving up or are we moving down?
Well, we went lower. You know, last week I went to about 7 different things. What's going on in France? You look at Australian production. You look at Argentina. Things going on around the world that could result in higher prices. Single in by themselves they won't, but we talked about building that snowball and getting it rolling. Well, it got to rolling, and of course it got to rolling downhill because I was talking about it going up. And I think what happened there is that some reports came out this week. We talked about lower production in Australia, and Australian production is lower, but it's not as low as it is expected to be, and they raised it up. They raised Australia's production in some other places, and we just broke through some resistance, and we went 10 or 15 cents lower.
Well, and then the WASDE report came out also.
I think that was another factor that resulted in prices going down. You know, they lowered exports for wheat by 25 million. They increased ending stocks. I think the market anticipated that because when that bearish report came out, prices didn't move at all. They moved in front of the report, and I think that's because the market had relatively good information going into that report, but it didn't make me look too good from last week's video.
Well, and then of course there's some news about one of the world's largest importers of wheat. Talk about that.
Well, Egypt, they have rejected their last 2 tenders. One of the reasons is because those tenders had a premium in it called a risk premium of $10 to $20 a metric ton. Egypt may not have enough U.S. dollars. The world market for grains are in U.S. dollars. They may not have enough dollars, or they may not have the financial ability to pay for some of this product they're importing. And so the sellers are putting a risk premium in there. Egypt doesn't like to pay the premium, and so they're refusing to.
Now let's take all of that information. Where do you see the harvest price for wheat?
Well, right now you got to look what the market's offering in for wheat. The basis you could probably use is minus 50 cents off that KC July contract, which is about 465. So take 50 off, that'll get you about 415.
Wow.
Now I'm predicting for harvest 450, maybe 475. So something's got to happen between now and then. But you look at wheat, and it's not looking very good.
Now let's go to other crops. Let's talk about corn.
Well, the corn will be bid off the December contract, and right now that contract's about 385, something like that. You can look at forward contracts, what the elevators are offering for harvest delivered corn. It's in most of Oklahoma minus 55 under that. Well, it's minus 35 under that. Milo's a minus 55, which is that's going to get you about $3.20, somewhere in that range. Now, if you get up in central Oklahoma, it's about 35 cents higher, or if you get into Panhandle, it's about 45 cents higher.
Now, you kind of alluded to it there. Let's talk about sorghum.
Well, sorghum's 15 cents below the corn price. What I was talking there, corn a minus 35 basis, sorghum a minus 50 to a minus 55, so that's going to get you 15 cents lower than corn prices.
And now soybeans.
Soybeans, you've got that November contract about 850. The market 880. The market's about 75 under that. There's a couple places that's $1 under, but most of them around minus 75. So that'll get you around 8 and a nickel for the harvest price for soybeans.
Bringing all that back to wheat, a lot of guys went out and did the top dress. They've invested in this crop. Should they be worried about that low price for wheat?
Well, I'd be concerned about it, but there's nothing they can do. They just got to wait and see what happens to our price. The price is below cost of production, but if you will look at those wheat contracts between now and September, there's a 10-cent premium on prices as you go out, and then there's about a 20-cent premium between SEP and DEES. You go out to July of 17, you've got prices, if you take off that 50 cents, that are above $5. So I think, the market's saying that price has to come up, and I believe at some point in time it will come back up above cost of production.
Okay, cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay, Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Now for some information on an upcoming no-till event. Here's our Soil Nutrient Management Specialist, Brian Arnell.
No-Till Oklahoma Conference will be going on March 1st and 2nd down in Norman. Registration can be found at notill.okstate.edu. Sponsorship information can be also found at the same website. There's going to be a great lineup. We have speakers on big data. We have speakers on cover crop weed control, and all the normal speakers you'd expect to see with Dr. Warren, Dr. Taylor, and all the extension specialists with OSU. Early bird registration is $150 per person, and if you register after February 19th or at the door, it's $175. No-Till Conference has a great variety of information that really impacts the state. It's one of the best meetings that we put on with Oklahoma State University, a large, diverse group from multiple states, and the information is just really broad and really applicable.
Good morning, everyone. Al's gone this week and he's left me in charge, so I'm going to start a new segment I call What the Heck? So let's take a look at the rainfall map from January 1st through February 10th, and we'll start our new segment. Now looking at that map, you have to say, what the heck? As we mentioned several times, the rains and ice and snow have been largely missing during 2016. We've had a decent amount of moisture from southwestern up through central and north central Oklahoma since January 1st, but nothing like we had to end 2015, especially in November and December. Now, if you look at the percent of normal map since the beginning of the year, areas other than that swath from southwest and north central Oklahoma have fallen to less than 80% or even less than 20% of normal over there in eastern Oklahoma. So pretty pathetic since the beginning of the year. And it's even worse when you look at the past 30 days. We have really gotten dry. So this is for the period January 11th through February 9th. We see way too many readings on that Mesonet map of less than a ½ inch. And we take a look at the percent of normal map, almost the entire state is well below normal, below 50% of normal even. We've seen less than a ½ inch of rain on average over the state over the last 30 days, more than an inch below normal, and that ranks as the 7th driest such period on record since at least 1921. So way too many readings on that map that are in the less than single digits. Now when we look at the outlooks for next week, we have to once again say, what the heck? We see increased odds of below normal precipitation, which we shouldn't be seeing this long during the strong El Nino that's going on. But we also see another culprit starting to sneak in. We've seen this a little bit this week, and that's that above normal temperature regime. So we do see increased odds of above normal temperatures. Combine that with the dry conditions of next week. We hope we don't have some more of those wildfire conditions, but it does look like that winter has ended for a little while, and now we're entering spring. So as I've said, we've had some pretty bad wildfires. We're going to have lots of warm days coming up this week, it looks like. If we get any of those dry cold fronts, even if it cools us down, that's going to mean more fire danger. The plants are going to start wanting to sprout and bloom and wanting moisture. So we don't need this early. We need February to act a little bit more like February. But if it's going to be warm, we could at least get some rainfall. So that's what we have to hope for in the future. That's it for now. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
As the wheat's coming out of dormancy, you may be thinking about where you're going to put that wheat after harvest. And Carol, there's a lot of options that producers can be looking at this time of year.
Absolutely. This is a great time to take a trip out to your storage facilities, walk around and look at some of your harvest equipment and get some of these things out of mothballs and see what we need to do to prepare for this next harvest. When we look at grain bins, there's many things that you can be doing now to prepare for that new harvest crop to go into storage, and that'll save you some money and some time down the road. We want to prevent those insects and the rodents and the birds for stealing our profits, and now is the time when you need to do the work to do that.
Kind of walk us through some of the options that producers have.
Well, of course, we've got in Oklahoma 3 main options for storage, and of course the steel bins are a go-to for most people. We also have our concrete elevators and flat storages around the state. Of course, with our seismic activity in the past year or two, there's some added things we need to look at this year, and one is the cracks in foundations and any loose bolts on the steel bins, any cracks, any recorrugation on the steel sheets would all indicate some kind of change in that bin, which could be a catastrophic situation when you fill it with grain.
Now let's talk about the bags also. There's also that option.
We have the grain bags out, the big white tubes, grain bags. Now's a good time to be looking at your land, the land use you're going to put those on. Look at the drainage, prepare that land now and get it all leveled off, and make sure you've got your supply for the bags sealed down for the summer. Look at your equipment so that it's ready to put grain in those bags. If you're looking at tote sacks, you're going to put those into a flat storage, and you want to prepare that flat storage by making sure it's clean, swept out, dry. If there's any leaks in the building, now's the time to fix that, not when you've got it full of tote sacks. So now's the time to do those things, not when you're hurried at harvest and you've got everything else on your mind and it goes undone.
Now, you've also come up with a one-stop shop fact sheet here.
We do. We have a new fact sheet. It's BAE 1112. It's called Preparing Grain Bins and Flat Storages Prior to Harvest or Incoming Product Storage. So it's a long title. But this fact sheet has some good information about maintenance and preparing those buildings and their storage structures for the coming harvest. The coolest thing about this fact sheet is Edmund Bonjour, our extension stored product entomologist specialist, put together a large table on the different products, chemicals that you can use for empty bin sprays and exterior sprays to help you keep the insect population down. We had, the 3 years of drought. We didn't have a lot of insect pressure those 3 years, so we kind of got a false sense of security, thinking we're never going to have insects again.
Right.
Well, last year they were back in full force. So this is a one-stop shop to find all the information about those chemicals that are available to producers and storage managers and help them maintain the quality of their grain without insects.
Because it's easier to get ahead of the insects while there's no grain in the bin.
Exactly, that's right. And many of these you can use without a fumigation license. They're a spray. Of course, make sure you got all your protective gear on, but we can do perimeter sprays to keep down the insects on the outside, that their next stop is inside in your grain. And then you can spray the empty bin and prepare it, get rid of all of those insects that have harvested over the winter, and they're just waiting for your new crop to have dinner on.
So this is a perfect time to prepare for the wheat crop.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't wait. Do it now.
Okay.
Enjoy these nice days.
I'm telling you. Okay, Carol, thank you very much. And we'll put a link to that fact sheet on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
The volatility of the feeder cattle market this winter has left some wheat pasture available for cow-calf producers to use either for adult cows or in many cases for replacement heifers. Questions have arisen through the years about the utilization of wheat pasture for young replacement heifers that are going to be bred later this winter, early spring period. The concern comes from the very high protein content that's in the wheat diet that those heifers are receiving. Therefore, about 5 or 6 years ago, here at Oklahoma State University, we conducted a trial to take a good look at this particular situation to see if there were any problems in terms of breeding heifers that had been grazing wheat most of the winter. For 2 years in a row, we took 40 replacement heifers. Half of those heifers stayed on wheat pasture from early December clear through late April into May into a graze out period. The other half of the replacement heifers were on wheat until about mid-March, 3 weeks prior to the anticipated breeding season. Then they were removed, put in a dry lot situation on a good growing self-fed diet that allowed them to gain at about the same rate as what we expected the heifers that were out on wheat to gain as well. All of these heifers were synchronized and bred to fixed time artificial insemination, then 10 days later exposed to fertile bulls for another 45 days. What we found was that the heifers that were maintained on wheat pasture into and through the breeding season actually had as good a results as those that were put up into a dry lot 3 weeks prior to breeding. In fact, the numbers were that about 75% of the heifers on wheat were cycling at the start of ester synchronization, as compared to only 55% of those that had been in that dry lot program. As we got through the artificial insemination, then 54% of the heifers that had been on wheat pasture were actually bred to AI, as compared to 43% of the heifers that were bred while they're in the dry lot. And as we then looked at the final pregnancy rates, as we could examine them the next fall, 98% of those heifers that had gone through most of the winter and spring on wheat pasture were bred, as compared to 88% of those that had been put up in the dry lot there in mid-March. I think the lesson that we can learn from this data is that we can use wheat pasture as a growing program for these young replacement heifers that are going through their first breeding season with confidence that although it is extremely high in protein, has excess protein, it doesn't seem to impact the reproductive capabilities of these young heifers, and we can utilize this forage as a pretty economical source of and a way of growing these replacement heifers. If you would like to look at that study in more detail, go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu. Look under show links, and we've got a link there to the actual research report that was written about this particular study. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
One of the most common questions about wildlife management involves food plots. To help landowners and hunters have a better idea of how to use food plots, we've created an app at Oklahoma State University. This app is available for free download at the App Store for your iPhone or iPad. Just type wildlife food plots and it should come up. And it includes topics on species such as pheasant, bobwhite, wild turkey, white-tailed deer, and mourning dove, and waterfowl. You can select on each species, and under those different wildlife species there'll be a list of cool season and warm season plants that you can plant specifically for those wildlife species. For each plant it'll tell you about fertility requirements, planting dates and rates, and also some basic information about that plant and how it would be utilized by that target wildlife species. You can save those plants and create lists so that when you go to purchase seed you'll have those lists ready to go. The one thing I would caution is not to over-rely on food plots, though. This is one small aspect of an overall wildlife management plan. It may help to track game, to help you see more game. Some cases it can provide more nutrition, but it's not a substitute for larger scale habitat management practices such as prescribed fire or timber thinning, timber management. An additional resource that you might want to check out is a practical guide to wildlife food plots, and this is available for purchase on the Quality Deer Management Association website.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at sunup.